There's a reason Generation Z processes the world differently, and it isn't weakness. You've been called fragile, overly sensitive, addicted to your phones. But today, we're going deeper into what actually shaped you. Let's start with something that sounds impossible to previous generations. You're 8 years old. You're sitting at the kitchen table with an iPad in your hands. But you're not just playing a game. You're watching a video of a school shooting. Then another, then coverage of a terrorist attack. Then a climate change documentary that says the world is ending. Then an algorithm recommends another tragedy. And another. Your parents are in the next room, unaware that you've just consumed more human suffering before breakfast than your grandparents witnessed in a lifetime. By today's standards, this is normal childhood. But let's be clear about what this actually means. You didn't grow up with an internal compass built in a parking lot. You grew up with a fire hose of global catastrophe pointed directly at your developing brain. Previous generations had the luxury of ignorance. You had the burden of knowing everything all at once before you were old enough to process any of it. Think about what that does to a mind. You're in your bedroom at midnight. You should be asleep. Instead, you're watching the Amazon rainforest burn in real time. You're reading about another pandemic, another economic collapse, another mass extinction. The algorithm knows you clicked on that first climate video, so it feeds you dozens more, each one more urgent than the last, each one telling you that your future is being stolen while you're still in middle school. This created something unprecedented in human history. You developed what psychologists call anticipatory grief before you even hit puberty. You were mourning a future you'd never experienced. While Gen X was building forts in the woods, you were building anxiety disorders in your bedroom. Not because you were weak, but because you were the first generation raised in a world where every crisis was a trending topic. But the wait didn't stop with global catastrophe. It extended into every corner of your daily existence. Think about your phone. It's not just a device. It's a 24/7 performance stage where your worth is quantified in real time. You post a photo. Within seconds, you're checking to see if people liked it. 10 likes, you feel invisible. 100 likes, you feel seen. But here's the trap. That feeling lasts about 5 minutes before you need another hit of validation. Previous generations experimented with identity in private. They tried on different versions of themselves at the mall, in the neighborhood, among friends. If they looked ridiculous or made a mistake, only the people physically present knew about it. But you, every phase of your identity formation is documented, screenshotted, and potentially permanent. You can't just be a teenager making mistakes. You have to be a teenager making mistakes in front of an audience that never forgets. You're 13 years old. You post something you think is funny. It gets 2 comments, both negative. You delete it within an hour, but it's too late. Someone screenshotted it. Now it's in a group chat. Now it's being passed around. That moment of vulnerability you tried to erase. It's living forever in someone else's camera roll. This taught you something devastating, that there is no privacy, no second chances, and no room for growth. You learned that any mistake could become your permanent identity. This is why you seem so careful, so calculated, so afraid to take risks. It's not weakness, it's pattern recognition. You watched classmates get destroyed for a single bad tweet. You saw careers ended before they began because someone dug up a post from when they were 14. You learned early that the internet is not a playground. It's a courtroom where you're always on trial and the jury never stops watching. And while you were navigating this digital minefield, you were also handed another impossible task, curating your entire life into content. Previous generations had hobbies. You have personal brands. They went on vacation to relax. You go on vacation to create content. They had friendships. You have follow accounts. Every moment of your life has been turned into potential material for consumption. Think about the last time you went somewhere beautiful, a sunset, a concert, a moment with friends. Did you experience it first, or did you experience your phone screen first, making sure you captured it for the grid? You've been trained to see your own life through the lens of how it will perform online. You're not living moments, you're producing them, and when the content doesn't perform well, it feels like the moment itself was wasted. This created a psychological split that's hard to articulate. You're simultaneously hyper-visible and deeply unseen. Millions of people might watch your video, but do any of them actually know you? You can have 10,000 followers and still feel completely alone. Because what they're following isn't you. It's the character you've created, the edited highlight reel that hides everything real. But here's what the older generations miss when they judge you for this. You didn't choose this system, you were born into it. Imagine being dropped into a game where the rules were already set, where everyone around you was already playing, and where opting out meant social invisibility. You adapted because you had to, and the cost of that adaptation is what you're carrying now. Let's talk about school. Previous generations complained about homework. You're dealing with something far more insidious. You're sitting in class and the lesson is happening. But so is everything else. Your phone is buzzing in your pocket. Someone just posted in the group chat. There's a new TikTok trend. Your crush just updated their story. A news alert about another crisis. Your brain is trying to focus on algebra, but it's also trying to manage 17 different streams of information simultaneously. This isn't distraction. This is cognitive overload by design. The apps you use were engineered by some of the smartest people in the world to be addictive. Every notification is a dopamine hit. Every scroll is a gamble. Will this be interesting or boring? Your brain is being trained to crave novelty every few seconds. And then adults look at you and say, why can't you just focus? You're not broken. You're responding exactly as you were programmed to respond. But the cost is real. You have the attention span of someone living in a war zone because in a way you are. You're under constant bombardment from information, opinions, crises and social pressures that never stop, never slow down, never give you room to breathe. And when you try to express how overwhelming this feels, you're told you're being dramatic. You're told previous generations had it harder. They walked uphill both ways. They had wooden spoons and paper roots. But here's what they don't understand. You're not competing with their past. You're trying to survive a present they can't even comprehend. Think about your first awareness of money. For previous generations, this came through a paper route or a summer job. For you, it came through watching your parents stress about rent, while scrolling through influencers flaunting wealth you'll never have. You learned early that the system is rigged. You watched millennials graduate into a recession. You watched them drown in student debt for degrees that didn't deliver the promised jobs. And then you were told to do the same thing. Go to college, take on debt, and hope it works out. But you're smarter than that. You've seen the math. You know that a 4-year degree might leave you $100,000 in debt with no guarantee of employment. So you're searching for alternatives. Side hustles, content creation, freelancing, multiple income streams. You're not lazy. You're pragmatic. You're building parallel paths because you've watched what happens when people put all their faith in a single institution. This is why you seem so entrepreneurial, so desperate to monetize every skill. It's not greed, it's survival instinct. You grew up watching economic systems fail the people who played by the rules. So you're writing your own rules because you have to. But while you're hustling, you're also hyper-aware of every injustice in the world. Previous generations had the luxury of ignorance. If something terrible was happening on the other side of the planet, they might not hear about it for days or weeks. You hear about it in real time, with video footage, with survivor testimonies, with calls to action that make you feel guilty for not doing more. You're 16 years old, and you're expected to have informed opinions on climate policy, international conflicts, systemic racism, gender identity, economic inequality, and mental health awareness. You're supposed to be an activist, an ally, an advocate, all while still figuring out who you are. The emotional labor of caring about everything all the time is crushing you. But if you admit you're exhausted, you're accused of privilege or apathy. This is the trap of performative empathy. You have to care visibly. You have to post the right things, share the right resources, use the right language, or you're complicit. But here's the truth. You can't actually care about everything. No human can. Your nervous system wasn't designed to hold the weight of every global crisis simultaneously. But you've been told that if you're not trying, you're part of the problem. So you perform, you repost, you add the hashtags, but inside you're drowning. You're experiencing what's called compassion fatigue before you're old enough to vote. You're numb to tragedies that should devastate you because you've been exposed to so many that your brain has started shutting down to protect itself. And when you try to escape, when you just want to watch something funny or mindless to give your brain a break, you're judged for that too. You're told you're wasting time. You're told you should be productive, learning a skill, building your resume, optimizing your future. There's no permission to just exist. There's no space where you're allowed to be unproductive and unapologetic about it. Let's talk about loneliness. You're the most connected generation in history. You can video call someone on the other side of the world instantly. You can join communities of people who share your exact niche interest. But you're also the loneliest generation on record. Because connection without presence is just performance. You can have 1,000 online friends and still feel like nobody truly knows you. Think about the last time you sat with someone without checking your phone. How long did it last? 30 seconds? A minute? You've been conditioned to believe that if you're not documenting the moment, it doesn't count. But the cost of that documentation is the moment itself. You're so busy capturing life that you're not living it. This is why you crave authenticity so desperately. You're exhausted by the performance. You want someone to see the messy, unfiltered version of you and not run away. But finding that is almost impossible when everyone else is performing too, so you settle for parasocial relationships, connecting deeply with creators who share their vulnerabilities online, even though they'll never know your name. And here's something nobody talks about: the weight of comparison. You're not just comparing yourself to your classmates anymore. You're comparing yourself to the entire world. That girl with the perfect skin, she's using a filter. That guy with the perfect life, he's showing you 30 seconds of his day and hiding the other 23 hours and 30 minutes. But your brain doesn't know that. Your brain just sees everyone else winning while you're struggling to get out of bed. You scroll through Instagram and everyone is traveling, everyone is successful, everyone is in love, everyone has it figured out. Meanwhile, you're sitting in your bedroom wondering why you can't seem to get your life together. But here's the secret they're not telling you. Nobody has it figured out. Everyone is faking it. The difference is you're seeing their highlight reel and comparing it to your behind-the-scenes footage. This constant comparison is rewiring your brain. Studies show that the more time you spend on social media, the more likely you are to experience depression and anxiety. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is being tricked into believing that everyone else's life is better than yours. You're competing in a race where everyone else appears to be miles ahead, but the truth is they're all just better at pretending. And let's talk about dating. Previous generations met people at school, at parties, through mutual friends. There was mystery. There was anticipation. There was the thrill of wondering if someone liked you back. But you grew up with dating apps that turned romance into a shopping catalogue. Swipe left, swipe right, next, next, next. You're making split-second decisions about someone's entire worth based on 5 photos and a bio, and they're doing the same to you. This turned human connection into a commodity. You're not a person with depth and complexity. You're a profile that either makes someone stop scrolling or keeps them swiping. And when you do match with someone, there's a new set of rules to navigate. How long do you wait to message? What do you say? How many messages before you ask to meet? And even if you meet and it goes well, there's always the knowledge that they're probably still swiping, still keeping their options open, still treating you like you're replaceable. This created what psychologists call the paradox of choice. When you have unlimited options, you can never fully commit to one because you're always wondering if something better is just one swipe away. So relationships become disposable, people become disposable, and you're left feeling like you're not enough because you can be replaced with a single swipe. But while you're navigating all of this digital chaos, you're also dealing with a world that's literally on fire. You grew up watching the climate crisis unfold in real time. You've seen the documentaries, you've read the reports. You know that scientists are saying we have less than a decade to make massive changes or face irreversible damage, and you're supposed to just go to school, get a job, buy a house, have kids, and pretend everything is fine. You can't, because you know it's not fine. You know that the systems that previous generations built are collapsing. You know that the planet they're leaving you is damaged. You know that the economy they promised would take care of you is broken, and you're angry about it. You should be angry about it, but that anger has nowhere to go. You can't fix the climate crisis by yourself. You can't dismantle corrupt systems as a teenager. You can't reverse decades of damage before you're even old enough to vote. So the anger turns inward. It becomes anxiety. It becomes depression. It becomes a sense of hopelessness that sits in your chest like a stone. And when you try to talk about it, you're told you're being too negative. You're told to focus on the positive. You're told that every generation thought the world was ending and they all survived. But here's the difference. They weren't watching it happen in real time. They weren't seeing ice caps melt on their phones. They weren't reading studies that said their future was disappearing while they were still in high school. You're not being dramatic. You're being realistic. And the fact that realism is now considered pessimism tells you everything you need to know about how broken the system is. But here's what nobody tells you about all of this weight you're carrying. you're also building something extraordinary. You're the most emotionally intelligent generation in history. You talk openly about therapy, about mental health, about boundaries. You've normalized conversations that previous generations buried under shame. You've created language for experiences that didn't have names before. You're not fragile, you're honest. You're not overly sensitive. You're refusing to pretend everything is fine when it isn't. Previous generations called that strength, sucking it up. You call it what it actually is, repression, and you're choosing a different path. You're also the most inclusive generation. You see people, not stereotypes. You question systems that previous generations accepted without thought. You demand better because you've seen what the way it's always been produces. Inequality, environmental collapse, and cycles of trauma that nobody bothered to break. You're more politically engaged than any generation before you. You organize protests. You vote in record numbers. You hold institutions accountable. You refuse to accept injustice just because it's always existed. You're fighting for a better world even though you inherited a broken one, and you're more creative than any generation in history. You've turned memes into art. You've built entire careers out of content creation. You've found ways to express yourselves that didn't exist a decade ago. You've created communities across continents. You've used technology not just to consume, but to build, to connect, to create change. Every time someone from an older generation tells you you're too sensitive, remember this. You're not carrying less than they did. You're carrying infinitely more, and you're doing it without the ignorance that protected them. You're navigating a world they can't comprehend with tools they never needed, and you're still standing. You're still here, still trying, still fighting for a future that sometimes feels impossible, still searching for meaning in a system designed to extract value from your attention, still believing that things can be better even when everything tells you they can't. And that's not weakness, that's resilience of a kind the world has never seen before. You were never meant to carry this much, but you're carrying it anyway, and that makes you stronger than any generation that came before.